Today in this video, we're going to talk about junction boxes in gas furnaces where you bring in the power to the furnace and connect it to the leads on the furnace to supply power to all the components. Junction boxes are usually simple metal boxes where you can wire nut the power wires to the leads off the furnace, but sometimes junction boxes were used to put relays and transformers on before we had completely solid-state controls on gas furnaces. So the junction box can come in a variety of different sizes and functions, so you need to be aware of what type you're working with when you're working on a gas furnace. On the outside of the furnace where the junction box is located, normally a technician will put a off switch there for the furnace. Many local codes and municipalities require a shutoff switch to be within sight of the gas furnace. Along with putting a shutoff switch on the furnace, a lot of times technicians will put a power outlet on the side of the furnace to either plug in accessories or something with the furnace, or to plug in their tools or their light when they're working on the furnace. A gas furnace needs to be properly grounded for the proper operation of a furnace. If you're having a furnace that ignites and shuts down shortly, or if it's doing erratic behavior, it quite possibly could be a bad ground. So make sure when you're installing a gas furnace that you run a separate ground for the gas furnace from the main panel. Most manufacturers will give you many options for the junction box and its location. These are just a few from a drawing off one of the major manufacturers. So you have the option of coming in the left or the right side of the furnace, and also up high or down low, depending on how your electrical is being run to the furnace. Most of your gas furnace manufacturers supply a two-part junction box in most of the supply bags that come with the gas furnace, and they run the leads from the furnace into this junction box, and then your power leads come in from the outside of the furnace into the junction box to be wired to the wires that go into the furnace. The junction box on the outside of the furnace has to be provided by the installer. Junction boxes are usually two-piece sheet metal parts that come in the bag with the furnace, and they're put together as you run the wires into the furnace. And then the box on the outside of the furnace where you wire in the switch is supplied in the field. And be careful how you wire everything in together. I'll tell you a story in a moment of a problem that was caused because the installers were not watching how they were wiring all this junction box and the connection on the side of the furnace. So instead of the wires coming into the furnace hanging out like this, the junction box provides a clean, safe installation for these wires, as this is 115 volts that is being supplied to the furnace. So with the cover on this junction box, it makes it a lot safer when working around the inside of the furnace. A lot of times in new construction, you find a furnace that is being run off an extension cord, and I've actually seen some that have been installed and left that way and are running off an extension cord. This, of course, is not recommended and could pose a safety hazard, and it could also pose some other hazards. This is a statement out of a major manufacturer's installation guide regarding alternate power supplies. This furnace is designed to operate on utility-generated power, which has a smooth sinusoidal waveform. If the furnace is to be operated on a generator or other alternate power supply, the alternate power supply must produce a smooth sinusoidal waveform for compatibility with the furnace electronics. The alternate power supply must generate the same voltage, phase, and frequency as shown in Table 9 or the furnace rating plate. Power from an alternate power supply that is non-sinusoidal may damage the furnace electronics or cause erratic operation. So when installing a furnace, make sure that you are running it off a utility-generated power which has the smooth sinusoidal waveform. So you'll notice in this wiring diagram that the junction box is depicted, and you have your L1 coming in with a fuse in the disconnect. Your L2 is white, and then you have your ground. And as we stated before, it is very important to make sure that you have a good ground to the furnace all the way back to the main panel. So I said I'd tell you a little story about how important it is to wire things correctly. We had a dealer a couple of years ago that had a gas furnace installed in an attic in a horizontal position. And they had a light switch that you had to turn on to have light in the attic when you went up into the attic to work on the furnace. The furnace installation went great. The installers left. A couple hours later, the homeowner called and said the gas furnace had shut down and would not come back on. So they sent a technician out. He went up into the attic, turned the light on, worked the furnace for a few cycles, and didn't find anything wrong. So he turned the light out, went out of the attic, and left. A couple hours later, the homeowners called again and said, our furnace is not working again. So they sent a different tech out, and he went up to the attic, turned the light on, cycled the furnace numerous times, couldn't find anything wrong. So he left, and a few hours later, the homeowner called again and said the furnace is not working again, it's locked out. So to make a long story short, after numerous service calls out there to try to figure out why the furnace is not operating, they found out that when the installers had wired in the condensate pump, they wired it in through this switch. So when the technician and the installers were in the attic with the light on, the condensate pump was powered. When they left the attic and turned the switch off, power to the condensate pump was turned off also. And so after a few hours of furnace operation, condensate would build up and the safety switch would shut the furnace down. So when you're wiring lights and switches and condensate pumps and things for the furnaces, make sure you get everything wired correctly, because you could develop a situation like this that really drove these technicians crazy for a while until they figured it out.
Go to Airefco.com for more videos, like, subscribe, and check back every week for new videos.